Harlem, the Cotton Club. Monday night, September 16th, 1935. 10:47 p.m. The Cotton Club was packed. Over 200 patrons, illegal whiskey flowing, the wealthy white downtown crowd mixing with gangsters and politicians, Duke Ellington's orchestra on stage, the kind of scene that made the Cotton Club the most glamorous and most dangerous nightclub in New York simultaneously. Dutch Schultz sat at his reserved table near the stage. The Dutchman, the beer baron of the Bronx, the bootlegger who'd survived the beer wars and built a $20 million annual empire. Feared by cops, respected by mobsters, untouchable, or so he thought. Across the room, at a small table in the back, sat Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson. 29 years old, Harlem's rising power in the policy rackets, quiet, watching, calculating, always calculating. Schultz had been drinking since 8 p.m. By 10:45, his face was flushed red. Not just from whiskey, from rage. Because Bumpy Johnson, this colored upstart, had refused to work for him, had refused to hand over his policy banks, had the audacity to tell Dutch Schultz no. The music was loud, the conversation louder. Nobody noticed Schultz stand up from his table, not until he started walking, stomping, across the club toward Bumpy's table. His bodyguards scrambled to follow. Other patrons turned to watch. Because Schultz's body language made it clear something dramatic was about to happen, Schultz reached Bumpy's table, didn't lean down for a quiet conversation, didn't lower his voice to maintain civility. Instead, Schultz slammed his hand down on Bumpy's table so hard the bourbon glass jumped and spilled, and he shouted, loud enough that people across the club stopped their conversations, loud enough that the band faltered, loud enough that every single person in the Cotton Club heard every word. "You've got some nerve showing your face here tonight, boy." 200 people went silent. You think you're somebody? You think running penny ante policy banks in Negro Town makes you a real gangster? Schultz leaned down, his face inches from Bumpy's. "I've been trying to be reasonable with you people, trying to give you coloreds a chance to work for me and make something of yourselves. But you're too stupid to understand when somebody's doing you a favor." He straightened up, addressing the entire club now. This is what happens when you let niggers think they're equal. They forget their place. They forget who actually runs this city. The entire Cotton Club was frozen. 200 witnesses to public humiliation so vicious, so racist, that even in 1935 people were shocked. Bumpy Johnson didn't stand up, didn't reach for the .45 he carried, didn't make any threatening gesture at all. He just looked up at Schultz with eyes that showed no emotion whatsoever, no anger, no fear, no reaction to the slurs or the insult, and waited for Schultz to finish. The silence was absolute. Then Bumpy spoke. His voice was so quiet, people had to strain to hear it. So calm it seemed disconnected from Schultz's fury. So cold that several witnesses later described it as the most frightening thing they'd ever heard. "Mr. Schultz, in 7 days, you're going to come to me begging. Not for money, not for territory. You're going to beg me to kill you, because death will seem like mercy compared to what I'm about to do." Schultz threw back his head and laughed, a huge, genuine laugh that filled the silent club. 7 days? This Negro is giving me 7 days? You hear that, everybody? The boy thinks he can threaten Dutch Schultz. Schultz turned to the crowd, playing to them like an actor. You all heard him. Bumpy Johnson, this nobody from the streets, thinks he can make me beg. Well, let me tell you something, boy." He turned back to Bumpy. "In 7 days, you'll be working for me or you'll be dead. Those are your only options, because niggers don't win against white men. That's just how the world works." Bumpy didn't respond. He simply stood up slowly, dropped a $20 bill on the table for his drink, and walked toward the exit. The crowd parted for him like he was contagious. Bumpy walked past Schultz without looking at him, walked past Schultz's bodyguards, walked out of the Cotton Club into the September night, and disappeared into the darkness. Schultz watched him go, still chuckling, shaking his head at the absurdity. He returned to his table, ordered another drink, spent the rest of the evening recounting the story to anyone who would listen. How he'd put that uppity colored boy in his place. How Johnson had just sat there taking it like all coloreds do when white men remind them who's really in charge. Dutch Schultz went to bed that night believing he'd won, believing he'd publicly crushed his last serious opponent in Harlem, believing the conflict was over. He was wrong. Tuesday, September 17th, 1935, 8:15 a.m. Frances Schultz, Dutch's 63-year-old mother, lived in a modest house in the Bronx that her son had bought her. Dutch visited every Sunday without fail. He was a vicious gangster to the world, but to his mother, he was still little Arthur, her boy. The package arrived with the morning mail. No return address, just her name and address written in neat block letters. Frances opened it at her kitchen table while drinking coffee. Inside was a large manila envelope. Inside that were photographs, dozens of them. Her son, Dutch, in various hotel rooms, with various women, doing things no mother should ever see. But it wasn't just the photographs that made Frances drop her coffee cup, shattering it on the floor. It was the note, written in those same neat block letters. "Mrs. Schultz, your son calls black people animals. What does that make him? These photos show what he does when he thinks nobody's watching. We've been watching him for 6 months. We know everything. Everything. Tell Arthur that Bumpy Johnson sends his regards. 6 more days." Frances Schultz, a devout Catholic who'd raised her son to be a good boy before the streets corrupted him, sat in her kitchen surrounded by broken china and pornographic images of her son, and wept. At 9:30 a.m., she called Dutch. "Arthur, you need to come here, right now." Dutch Schultz arrived at his mother's house at 10:15 a.m., found her in the kitchen, pale and shaking, the photos spread across the table. He stared at them, at his mother's face, at the note. "How did they—" He started. "Who is Bumpy Johnson?" his mother asked. Her voice was ice. "And what did you do to make someone send these to your mother?" Dutch had faced rival gangsters, had faced cops, had faced federal prosecutors. But facing his mother's disappointment and disgust was somehow worse. "It's nothing, Ma, just business. I'll handle it." Handle it? Frances stood up, her voice rising. "Arthur, someone has been photographing you for 6 months. Do you understand what that means? They've been following you, watching you, and you never knew. What else do they know? What else have they seen?" Dutch grabbed the photos, the note, all of it. "I said I'll handle it, Ma." He left, but his hands were shaking, because his mother was right. If Bumpy's people had been following him for 6 months without him noticing, what else did they know? What else had they seen? his money drops, his meeting locations, his safe houses, everything? Wednesday, September 18th, 1935. Dutch Schultz's empire wasn't built on violence alone. It was built on partnerships, with suppliers, with distributors, with corrupt cops and politicians, with other gangsters who found it more profitable to work with him than against him. Trust was everything in the underworld. Wednesday morning, September 18th, every single one of Dutch Schultz's major partners received an envelope. 23 envelopes, 23 partners, all delivered simultaneously. The envelopes contained FBI letterhead, official-looking documents, witness statements, financial records, phone transcripts. All of it showed in convincing detail that Dutch Schultz had been secretly cooperating with the FBI, that he'd been giving them information on his partners in exchange for immunity, that everyone who worked with Schultz was being set up for arrest. The documents were fake, masterfully created forgeries, but they looked real enough. By noon Wednesday, Dutch Schultz's phone was ringing off the hook. Dutch, what the fuck is this? Dutch, did you really rat on me? Dutch, I got a letter saying you're working with the feds. Partner after partner, all furious, all suspicious, all demanding explanations. Schultz tried to explain, tried to tell them it was bullshit, tried to convince them he'd never cooperate with law enforcement. But doubt, once planted, grows like poison. By Wednesday evening, 3 of his partners had cut ties completely. 5 more were taking a break from working with him. The others were waiting, watching, suspicious, and every envelope had contained the same note at the bottom. Compliments of Bumpy Johnson, 5 more days. Thursday, September 19th, 1935. Julia Winters was Dutch Schultz's mistress, had been for 2 years. A beautiful showgirl from the Ziegfeld Follies. Dutch had set her up in a nice apartment on the Upper West Side, visited her 3 times a week, told her things he never told his wife, trusted her. Thursday morning, September 19th, Julia Winters disappeared. Dutch arrived at her apartment at 11 a.m. for their usual Thursday meeting, used his key to let himself in. The apartment was destroyed, furniture overturned, lamps broken, blood on the walls, on the carpet, on the bed. So much blood. Julia was gone. On the bed, arranged carefully, were her clothes, her favorite dress, her shoes, her jewelry, all soaked in blood, and a note, pinned to the dress with a knife. She screamed your name before she died. She wanted you to save her. You weren't there. You were too busy at the Cotton Club, calling people names, acting tough, while we were here, with Julia, making her bleed, making her cry, making her beg. This is what happens when you disrespect Bumpy Johnson. 4 more days. Who dies next? Dutch Schultz, the man who'd killed dozens of people without flinching, fell to his knees in that blood-soaked apartment and screamed. He called his men, ordered them to search every inch of the city. Find Julia. Find her body. Find whoever took her. They searched for 2 days. Found nothing. Because Julia Winters wasn't dead. She was in a safe house in Queens. Perfectly fine. Paid $10,000 by Bumpy's people to disappear for a week and keep her mouth shut. The blood on her clothes was pig's blood from a butcher shop. But Dutch Schultz didn't know that. He thought she was dead. Tortured. Killed. Because of him. Because of what he'd said at the Cotton Club. The guilt ate at him like acid. Day, Friday, September 20th, 1935. Dutch Schultz tried to eat breakfast at his usual diner in the Bronx. Friday morning, 8 a.m. Same place he'd eaten breakfast every Friday for 3 years. The owner, a man named Sal, who'd always treated Dutch with respect, met him at the door. "I'm sorry, Mr. Schultz. We can't serve you anymore." "What?" "Please don't make me explain. Just, please leave." Dutch went to his usual lunch spot. Same thing. "Sorry, Mr. Schultz, we're closed." They weren't closed. People were eating inside. He tried a bar. No service. A restaurant. Get out. A speakeasy he part-owned. His own employee, terrified, shaking, told him, "Boss, I got word. I serve you. My family gets hurt. I'm sorry. I got kids." By Friday afternoon, Dutch Schultz couldn't buy food in his own city. Every establishment had gotten the same message. "Serve Dutch Schultz, and Bumpy Johnson's people come for you." Most business owners were too scared to risk it. The few who were loyal to Schultz were pressured by employees who refused to work if Schultz was served. Dutch Schultz, one of the richest gangsters in New York, went to bed Friday night hungry, eating crackers and canned food in his own house like a hobo. And everywhere he'd tried to eat, he'd found the same note left for him. "You called us animals, but animals don't starve their enemies. Humans do that." 3 more days. Saturday, September 21st, 1935. Dutch Schultz's organization employed over 200 men, bootleggers, enforcers, policy operators, collectors, all loyal, all paid well, all understanding that working for Dutch Schultz was dangerous but profitable. Saturday morning, Dutch called a meeting with his top 15 lieutenants, the men who actually ran his day-to-day operations. They met in a warehouse in the Bronx, secure location, guards outside. Dutch started the meeting by addressing the obvious, the psychological warfare being waged against him. "Bumpy Johnson is trying to scare me, to mess with my head. But it's not going to work. We're going to find him, and we're going to kill him. And this ends." His lieutenants exchanged glances. Finally, one of them, a man named Luca, who'd been with Dutch for 8 years, spoke up. "Boss, we got a problem." "What problem?" "The men are talking, saying maybe working for you isn't safe anymore." What the fuck does that mean?" Another lieutenant, Vincent, added, "Boss, half our guys got envelopes yesterday, letters saying your accounts are frozen, that the feds are coming, that you're broke and can't pay them anymore." "That's bullshit. We know that," Luca said. "But they don't, and even if they did, they're spooked. Johnson's been following you for 6 months without you knowing. He sent those photos to your mother. He made your mistress disappear. He got every restaurant in the city to refuse you service. The men are thinking, if he can do all that to you, what can he do to us?" Dutch looked around the table, saw the fear in his lieutenant's eyes, the doubt. "Are you saying my own men are turning on me?" "We're saying some of them are thinking about it," Vincent said carefully. "And the rest are watching to see what happens. Boss, nobody knows how to fight this. It's not a war. It's something else." Luca leaned forward. "Boss, maybe it's time to make peace. Apologize to Johnson. Give him whatever he wants. End this before it gets worse." Dutch Schultz's face went red. "Apologize? To a nigger? Are you fucking kidding me?" The silence that followed was heavy. Finally, Luca stood up. "Then I quit, boss. I got a family. I ain't dying for your pride." He walked out. 2 others followed him. By Saturday evening, Dutch Schultz had lost 6 of his top lieutenants. Not to violence, not to arrests, to fear. And on his desk, when he returned home, was another note. "Your empire is crumbling. Your men are leaving. Your partners don't trust you. Your mother is ashamed of you. And Julia, well, you'll never know if she died screaming your name or begging us to make it quick. 2 more days." Sunday, September 22nd, 1935. Dutch Schultz didn't have many soft spots. He was a gangster, a killer, a man who'd built an empire on violence and intimidation. But he loved his dog, a German shepherd named Max. He'd had Max for 5 years. The dog went everywhere with him, slept in his bedroom, ate scraps from his table, was the one living thing Dutch trusted completely. Sunday morning, Dutch woke up, and Max wasn't in his usual spot by the bed. He called for him. Nothing. He searched the house. Nothing. He went outside and found Max hanging from a tree in the backyard, a rope around his neck, his body still, his eyes open and glassy. Dutch Schultz, the man who'd killed rival gangsters with his bare hands, fell to his knees in his backyard and sobbed. He cut Max down, held the dog's body, rocked back and forth like a child. Pinned to the dog's collar was a note. "Even the dog knew you were a monster. He didn't struggle much when we came for him. One more day, Dutch. Tomorrow you come to Harlem and you beg me to end this, or we come for you. And we won't be as gentle as we were with Max." Dutch Schultz sat in his backyard holding his dead dog until his bodyguards found him 3 hours later. They had to physically carry him inside. One of his men, trying to comfort him, examined Max's body and realized something. "Boss, the dog's still warm. I don't think he's actually—" But Dutch wasn't listening. He was broken. Completely broken. The dog wasn't dead. It had been sedated with veterinary drugs. Would wake up in a few hours perfectly fine. But Dutch Schultz didn't know that. He buried Max that afternoon, had a funeral for him, cried like he hadn't cried since he was a boy. Monday, September 23rd, 1935. Dutch Schultz woke up Monday morning looking like he'd aged 10 years in 7 days. His eyes were hollow. His face was pale. His hands shook constantly. He hadn't slept more than a few hours total all week. Kept having nightmares about Julia screaming, about his mother finding those photos, about Max hanging from that tree. His organization was in shambles. Half his men had quit or were planning to. His partners didn't trust him. Every business in the city refused to serve him. His mother wouldn't speak to him. And Bumpy Johnson had done all of it without firing a single bullet, without killing a single person, without breaking a single law that could actually be proven. Monday afternoon at 2:00 p.m., Dutch Schultz did something he'd never done in his entire criminal career. He went to Harlem, alone, unarmed, to surrender. He found Bumpy Johnson at Small's Paradise, the same place this had all started 7 days ago. Bumpy was sitting at the same table, same spot, same bourbon. Like he'd been waiting, Dutch Schultz walked across the club. Every eye in the room followed him. 200 witnesses. Again, he reached Bumpy's table, and he fell to his knees. "Please," Dutch Schultz whispered. His voice was hoarse from crying, from screaming, from 7 days of psychological torture. Please, make it stop. Bumpy looked down at him. No expression. Make what stop, Mr. Schultz? Bumpy took a sip of his bourbon. Mr. Schultz, I haven't killed anyone, haven't hurt anyone. All I did was show you some truths. Show your mother who you really are. Show your partners how vulnerable you really are. Show you how easily everything you love can be taken away. He leaned forward. You came into my neighborhood 7 days ago and called me a nigger in front of 200 people. You said I was too stupid to run my own business. You said I needed to work for you or I'd be nothing. Dutch sobbed. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I was drunk. I was stupid. I didn't mean... You meant every word. Bumpy interrupted. And now you understand what it feels like to be humiliated in public, to have everything you built torn down, to be treated like you're nothing, to have people you trust turn away from you, to lose what you love. He finished his bourbon. Lou, you wanted me to beg you for my life 7 days ago. Well, here you are, begging me for yours. So I'm going to give you what you asked for. Mercy. Dutch looked up, hope in his eyes. You leave Harlem, Bumpy said. You close every operation you have in my neighborhood. You never come back. You never speak my name again. And you never, ever use that word again when talking about my people. You do that, and this ends. Julia comes home. Your dog wakes up. Your mother gets an apology letter from me explaining the photos were to teach you a lesson. Your partners get proof that the FBI documents were fake. Everything goes back to normal. Julia's alive? She's fine, having a nice vacation in Queens. Never touched her. The blood was from a pig. Max? Sedated. He'll wake up tonight with a headache, but he'll be fine. Dutch Schultz, comprehending that everything, all of it, had been psychological warfare, felt his mind crack just a little bit more. Bumpy stood up. Because dead men don't learn lessons, Mr. Schultz. Dead men don't spend the rest of their lives remembering what it cost them to disrespect someone. Dead men don't lie awake at night, thinking about how easily they were destroyed without a single bullet being fired. You'll live a long life, Mr. Schultz, and every single day you'll remember the week Bumpy Johnson made you beg. He dropped money on the table for his drink. Now get out of Harlem, and don't ever come back. Dutch Schultz stood on shaking legs, stumbled toward the exit, and left. The entire club watched in silence. Someone started clapping. Then another. Then the whole room erupted in applause. Bumpy Johnson didn't smile, didn't celebrate. He just sat back down and ordered another bourbon. October 23rd, 1935, 1 month later. Dutch Schultz never returned to Harlem. He closed every operation he'd had there, pulled out completely. His organization never fully recovered from the week of psychological warfare. The damage to his reputation, being brought to his knees by a colored gangster without a shot being fired, meant he was seen as weak, vulnerable. His partners never fully trusted him again. His men were always looking over their shoulders, wondering if Bumpy Johnson was watching. On October 23, 1935, exactly 1 month after begging Bumpy Johnson for mercy, Dutch Schultz was shot and killed in a Newark restaurant by hitmen sent by Lucky Luciano and the Commission. They killed him not for what he'd done, but for what he'd become. A liability. a man who'd been mentally destroyed by a gangster they'd all underestimated. Bumpy Johnson heard about Schultz's death and said only, "I didn't have to kill him. His own weakness did that." The story spread throughout the criminal underworld, not the story the papers told about Dutch Schultz being killed in a mob hit, but the real story about how Bumpy Johnson destroyed a white gangster's empire in 7 days without violence, with intelligence, with psychological warfare, with precision. The lesson lasted generations. Bumpy Johnson doesn't need guns to destroy you. He just needs to know what you love, what you fear, what makes you human, and then he takes it all away until you beg him to make it stop. Dutch Schultz called Bumpy Johnson an animal at the Cotton Club in September 1935. 7 days later, Schultz proved that the real animal was the one who thought power came from violence instead of intelligence. Bumpy Johnson built his empire not on fear, but on respect, on understanding that the mind is a more powerful weapon than any gun, and on knowing that sometimes the cruelest thing you can do to an enemy isn't killing them. It's making them wish they were dead. I really want to know, where in the world are you watching this from? Drop your city or country in the comments. This story has reached readers on every continent, and I'm always amazed by how far these legends travel. Drop a comment, share this story. Let's talk about it. If this story of the bloodiest wedding in Harlem history hit different, drop a like and subscribe. See you in the next one.